All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Kendra Tanner. I'm back here at Urban Zen Yoga and Movement Studio in Swansea. And for those of you who don't know me, I am the creator and founder of the True You Project. And I'm actually recording this for two communities. So one, the Urban Zen community, which is right here in front of me, and the True You Project community, which is here. So I'm doing a 2-for-1 today. So if my eyes are going in two places, that's why. So great to be here with you, and I have something really important to share and also sometimes challenging to share. So we'll see where the conversation takes us today. But I want to be talking about the concept of our inner critic and how we can start to dial that down, and also why that's even important. And the reason why this is so challenging for me to talk about and share what I've learned with you is because it's something that is still very much a work in progress for me. And to be honest, most of what I talk about and share is something that is a work in progress for me. But this one in particular is a big one, and something I get stuck in and trapped in all the time. So I will do my best to be open and vulnerable and honest with you guys about, and real about, how this unfolds for me, in the hopes that it can just encourage you to work it for yourself, wherever that takes you. Okay, so just really quick, I'll also just give some context to these videos. So my intention is to do them weekly for the next few weeks, and to work through a book that I put together that is available on Amazon, and I can tell you more about that later. But this basically captures my own story and journey and lessons that I learned in terms of a recovery from an eating disorder. And so while what I'm about to say has everything to do and super pertinent for somebody if you are struggling with your relationship to food and your body, I've also found through sharing this and teaching and guiding others through the material that this concept of our inner critic is not just isolated to those who struggle with food and body. This is something that pretty much every single human on this planet deals with. So if you're listening and food and body is not your thing, don't worry, this could still have something, there could still be some value in this for you. And the other thing that I want to share about that, well, I'll just start with the vulnerability piece, is that one of the things in terms of how my inner critic works is that my inner critic kind of, I suppose, related to the video that I shared last week of wanting control and certainty and expectations, is that very much there feels like there's this, in the context of business, that there should be a specific audience that I'm speaking to, or a specific avatar that is out there that I'm speaking to, and like all these like really techie, like marketing-y things. And at the end of the day, if you're human, then this is who I'm speaking to. So if you're a human and you're watching this, then we're good to go. Okay, so inner critic. I thought I'd start by just kind of sharing how I know this to work, right? Like, what is the function of it? How does it show up? And then start to talk about how we could dial it down and why that's even important for your life, but also for the broader community at large. So dialing down the inner critic. So for me, there's one specific word that like really helps me understand it. If I'm kind of latching onto this idea of enough, that I am not enough, or maybe I'm too much, right? So I'm like, it's this idea, going back, using body as an example. There was a time where my body wasn't thin enough, right? And that might be something that maybe like a large percentage of people watching this could relate to, even if you don't necessarily struggle in that space. But I think in general in society, the perception of how we should look, the expectation of how we should look, is that we should fit into our body fits into a certain size. And so therefore we can easily compare and judge and criticize ourselves to say, yeah, not enough, right? Not thin enough, maybe not muscular enough, not toned enough, not flexible enough, not strong enough, like all these different things that we can place onto our physical self of not being enough. In addition to that, there's also then our emotional self, our personality, our spiritual self that we can easily start to criticize as well. And the crazy thing is that a lot of times what's going on in the physical also marries what's going on in the spiritual. So if we're criticizing our physical self, probably you're also criticizing your whole self, right? Like your true self is the self beyond the physical. So maybe it's things like I'm not smart enough, I'm not funny enough, I'm not cool enough, I'm not, I'm trying to think, successful enough. Definitely, that's a huge one. I think I'm not, I don't have enough money, I'm not, I guess, wealthy enough. All these different things. Also, I'm not creative enough. That's a big one too. Then on the flip side of that, there can also be this idea that maybe I'm too much, right? So I'm too loud, I'm too boisterous, I'm too emotional, my creative ideas are too out there, I'm too woo-woo, I'm too straight edge, I'm too prude, I'm too sexy, right? Like there's so many different things. There's like pick anything, and any way we want to measure ourselves and compare ourselves, we can come up with a story that either says that we're not enough or that we're too much. Okay, so the thing is that none of that is true, and so the place of healing and the place of freedom is being able to shift outside of believing those things. And so that's what I want to talk about a little bit today, is how you can start to identify those voices and then start to get closer to the truth, and what you could do as even like a daily practice to reinforce who you are at your core, regardless of how you may currently be measuring yourself against somebody else or a group of people. To understand how this works a little bit better is, let's just talk about the impact of that inner critic, the one that's comparing and judging you and putting yourself on a spectrum against other people. So what I find happens is one of two things. So one is that we can then start to try to adapt and change ourselves. And that might look like, in the context of food and body, it might look like my scenario, exercising more, eating less, to try to change my body so that it would then fit into the outcome that I wanted, and that I could then give myself permission to stop comparing myself, even though that never really happens. So one thing is you try to adapt and change yourself. The other thing is that you might start to actually hide yourself. You might start to withdraw and pull back because you don't want to be seen, okay? So I call this trying and hiding. We're talking here basically about ego mechanisms and having a healthy ego. And funnily enough, this morning when I came to yoga here at Urban Zen with Emily's class, she was working on our third chakra, and ego. And so a healthy ego knows that it doesn't have to try or hide, that it can just be. And however people are going to react to it, whatever they're going to receive from you, it's totally okay. Right? An ego that is, I'm not even going to use the word unhealthy because it's not so much about that, but it's an ego that's trying to protect yourself, right? Maybe it's a control mechanism, a protective mechanism, all those things like I mentioned last week. At the start, those are good things, right? You're watching, a part of you is watching out for yourself, which is awesome. At some point, it becomes maladaptive. It becomes maladaptive when it creates more stress than good. And so essentially you want to be noticing, when is this protective mechanism causing you more anxiety, more stress, more pain than it is actually doing what it's supposed to do and trying to keep you safe. And so again, it can look like one of two things: that pushing, striving, trying too hard, maybe trying to change yourself, conforming. So I'm just trying to think of another example. Okay, let's use business as an example, right? Like, everybody's doing like 5 social media posts a day, therefore I need to do that too. That might not be you. That might not work for your business. It might be overload for people, right? On the flip side, oh my God, I should be doing social media, but I just don't know what's going on, and I don't know if what I have to say sounds right, and I don't know if it looks good enough, and so I'm just not going to post anything, right? Hiding, okay? So that's another example aside from body that you might relate to, where you can just kind of use that to check in for your own life, where this trying and hiding might be showing up, and how it could be connected to this idea of I'm not enough or I'm too much, and your inner critic. Okay. So how do we start to dial that down? That's like a really great question. And so I'll share with you what I've learned and just a little bit of my own story. So I think the thing is that this has been something that I've more actively practiced for myself recently, that although this is super critical in shifting out of disordered eating cycles and having a healthy body image, that, to be honest, I was so deep in my shame pile that it's only been something I could access more recently. But I'm going to share some of the things. And so basically what we want to shift to is this place of criticism to acceptance. And so some other words that you can use to give you an idea is we want to go from a place of harshness to caring. So self-care, right? We want to go from a place of punishing ourselves to a place of kindness. So the idea of treating yourself like you would a friend. Also going to this place of, I guess another thing is we kind of rejecting ourselves the way we are. So there's this I'm not good enough the way I am, and I'm pushing myself away or trying to, change myself, to just being grateful for what is. Even, this is the hard part, with our imperfections, right? So this isn't about, I'm going to love myself once I reach this. It's no, I'm going to love myself right here, right now, here today, without changing one thing. Now, those might sound like really huge steps to take. So and I totally get that. And I want to offer you this image of layers, right? That this is a process. This is not an overnight thing. This becomes a practice similar to any other practice in your life, whether it's a physical practice of yoga or other kind of movement, or a spiritual practice that you have, that shifting out of shame, shifting out of criticism towards yourself, all these things, this is something that happens over time. And you basically just have to start with where you are. I think there can be two things that can help to start with that. One is recognizing how the voice shows up. So just really simply starting to ask yourself, how am I judging myself? How am I comparing myself? And this is getting used to getting to know your own thought process. And so yes, it's going to take slowing down. You might want to pick up a pen and paper and start journaling about this. I'm trying to think of an easy way to notice when you might be doing this if you don't have the exact thought going through your head. I suppose you can start to notice based on sort of the symptoms. So when you might be feeling tension inside of yourself because you are either pushing and striving too hard and try to force something to happen, or when you can tell you're holding back even though you really want to do something, right? I really want to perform on stage, but I'm not even going to go to an acting class, right? That kind of thing. So whenever you notice yourself holding back or trying too hard, that's when you can start to ask yourself, how am I comparing and how am I judging myself to other people? And that's going to be your inner critic, and that's what we want to deal with. So again, when you're noticing that, whatever that version of I'm not enough or whatever is, or I'm too much is coming up, this is not the place to fight. This is not the place to control that. This is not the time to even judge your own judgment. But the first step is, how do I bring love into that equation? And so maybe it's just a bit of surrender, okay, this is where I'm at. Maybe after that, it's okay, well, how then, what do I need right now? If I were a friend and my friend was telling me that every time I look in the mirror, I hate what I see, what would I say to her? And not just the placating, oh, but you look so great, right? What would you actually share to show her some love and do that to yourself? Another thing that you can do is actively look for places of gratitude for yourself. So again, whether it's your physical self or it's what your essence brings to the world, how can you just actively place that gratitude, and instead of putting coins into that box the bank of like the criticism, how do I put the coins into the gratitude and start to build up the gratitude bank for yourself? I know if you're thinking, yeah, that's like a little bit like, I don't know, just a little, not even woo-woo, but just a little like, ugh, how boring, right? I get you. I've had the same resistance to this. It's like, whatever. I don't need to be grateful for myself. I don't need to value myself. I'm good to go. Like, me and myself are like this. Yeah. And then 5 years down the road, you realize that actually your inner critic is like on high alert all the time. So I would really encourage you that if you're listening to this and you're just kind of like, whatever, I don't need to do this, I would encourage you to just try it for yourself and just see and notice again any resistance you have, right? Notice any judgment of your own process, and how can you bring love to that equation? How can you get to a place of just being with where you're at without judging it, and then starting to rebuild and put some form of gratitude into the bank? So to give you an example, gratitude for your body. So again, when I was coming out of disordered eating, I wasn't like actively practicing gratitude, like that was not happening, right? But what I was doing was sort of subconsciously starting to just starting to be with myself, with where I was. So I guess getting to that place of acceptance and realizing, you know what, instead of going for a run, because like when I was running, I was like beating up on myself at the same time that I was like pounding the pavement. So let me go to spin class because I get a little bit more joy when I do that. Or let me go play soccer because I enjoy that, right? And so maybe your version of gratitude, even if it's not a cognitive thing, it's just looking for the places in your life where you feel more joy, you feel more pleasure, you feel more yourself, and giving yourself the permission to do that. That can also be a really practical thing that you can do to kind of turn down the inner critic. If you're doing something when your inner critic is on like full volume, stop doing that thing and go do the thing where your mind can quiet a bit and you're more in the moment and more present with yourself and with your body, and give space for that. So hopefully that gives you some ideas for places to start. And if you have any questions about that, then feel free to leave a comment in the comment section or send me a message and I can help you out there. I want to just talk a little bit about and wrap up with why is this even important, and especially because I think there's two things going on here. One, this is uber super important. If you are noticing any symptoms or experiencing any low self-confidence, low self-esteem, that might also be connected to my story of a body image and disordered eating scenario, or just like depression, anxiety, you're not going out and socializing with friends, you're holding back in your creative outputs, or you're not pursuing your dreams and all those things, right? Like, so those are like very self-focused reasons why you would want to start to dial down your inner critic. And at the same time, I think that there's something greater going on in a more wider and collective community, where we live in a world where ego is like full on sometimes. And so you can see it at all levels of society. You can see it in politics, you can see it in the media, you can see it in like religious battles and things where people are saying, no, like, I'm right, you're wrong. And a lot of that, I feel, is driven by this shame perspective and this inner dialogue that's going on, where someone feels that they have to defend their position so much because they couldn't allow themselves to open up to a space of vulnerability, of perhaps of listening to another and showing another person a version of love that perhaps they can't even give to themselves. And so what I'll just offer to think about is that whether or not you look at your life and you see, yes, this is definitely a problem for me, or no, I've got this under wraps, that perhaps this is something that we can practice together, because the more gratitude we can show for ourselves, the more we can give that to someone else. The more acceptance of exactly who I am right here today, without my nails painted, right, without I don't know. I was gonna say I haven't shaved my legs in a couple days. That's probably TMI. But anyway, right? Like without asking myself to be anybody else than who I am, the more I can give that to the person next to me. And the more that we can give that to each other, all of a sudden, instead of building fences and building walls, we're actually starting to connect at a human level. And that's a place that I honestly and firmly believe that there's healing that happens across communities, for our environments, and beyond, just for our families, and it's not just happening on an individual level. And that's kind of why we're here, right? Like we're here to be an expression of love. We're here to bring forth our gifts and our skills, and our contribution to the world is one to be of letting love flow through us. And we can block that so easily when we block it to ourselves. And so if there's a place to start, it's always starting with yourself. Before you're trying to fix somebody else, it's looking inward and seeing where can I change, and not to necessarily fix, but just where can I transform and where can I change. And so if you're here and you know that in your deepest of hearts you want to be a conduit of love, you want to be able to let it flow through you, then start with understanding where do you get it blocked for yourself, and where does your own criticism and own shame stop you, not just energetically, but practically speaking, of allowing love to flow through. So that's my message for you today. And the thing that cracks me up about this every time, and this is something that I have struggled with, is, and this is where my own shame story, my own criticism has come up, is, but this is about food and body image and eating disorder recovery, and then all of a sudden we're talking about spiritual healing on a global level. And no, pick one, Kendra. It has to be one or the other. And actually, no, it doesn't. And so whatever passion and whatever message is on your heart, I want to encourage you. It's not too much, and don't hold it back, and go and speak it. Whatever desires you have for the world, whatever just feels true to you and true in your being, that you want to bring that forward, whether it's maybe starting a yoga teacher training, or maybe it's starting to share your music with the world, whatever, or maybe it's even just, spending more time with your family and being present for them in a different way. Every single little thing counts. And so that's my encouragement for you today, that it's not too much, and you definitely have more than what you need in order to pull that off. So, okay. That's lots of love to you there, and I'll just mention to you again that if you want to dive into this more, then feel free to get a copy of my book. You can get it on Amazon and Kindle, and also in the fall I'll be starting a program that will be using the book as a guide, and we'll be talking through these themes that I'll be sharing for the rest of the summer in much more detail, and you'll be able to have community around you to support you in terms of actually cultivating these practices in your own life. So registration is open for them. You can get in touch with me to register. I'm taking personal registrations. It's not like an online thing right now. We're going to be starting the end of September, beginning of October, and there's an early bird pricing through the end of next week. So it's £155, so get in touch. There'll be an online version and in person for those of you in Swansea and South Wales. And we can practice growing this gratitude and this acceptance and love for ourselves and our community together. So, all right, lots of love, and catch you guys soon. Bye.